Welcome to today's explainer. Look, we all know the massive battles and the intense family drama of the Mahabharata. But honestly, what's truly mind-blowing is how the Pandavas didn't just happen to be born with the right skills. They were methodically, purposefully designed by the gods. It was almost like a divine assembly line, put together to fulfill highly specific earthly needs. Let's dive into exactly how that happened.
Take a look at this incredibly harsh, absolute boundary. Queen Kunti is flat out refusing her husband, King Pandu's royal command. But how did we actually get here? How did a queen who literally possessed a magical formula to summon any god from the heavens to grant her a child reach a point where she had to slam on the brakes and just say no more? To understand this dramatic standoff, we really have to look at the escalating demands of a king who was trying to build the perfect dynasty.
So, in today's explainer, we're going to start with the birth of justice, move right along to the boy who broke stone, see the extremes of forging the ultimate warrior, check out a massive celestial celebration, and finally hit a hard wall with the limits of divine law.
Section 1. The Birth of Justice.
Okay, so this is where King Pandu's grand project really begins. He needs an heir, right? But not just any heir. He wants a son whose very foundation is built on absolute virtue. Notice the highly ritualistic four-step process that sets this whole thing in motion. First, Pandu realizes he needs a virtuous heir. Next, Kunti uses a special incantation. This was a formula given to her previously by the sage Durvasa to summon the eternal god of justice. And the text tells us this god arrives in a car resplendent as the sun. Then the god grants her a son, and Kunti brings forth this child at the highly auspicious 8th Muhurta on the 5th day of the lighted fortnight, right when the star Jyeshtha is ascendant, which leads us to the final step, a heavenly prophecy.
Literally, the second this child is born, this disembodied voice just booms from the skies saying, "He shall be the best of men, the foremost of those that are virtuous, ruler of the earth." This voice declares he's going to be named Yudhishthira. Unwavering justice wasn't just something he was taught as he grew up. It was his permanent, divinely engineered core trait from his very first breath.
Section 2. The boy who broke stone.
So, Pandu has secured his heir of pure virtue, but he almost immediately shifts his strategy. He looks at his newborn virtuous son and realizes something absolutely critical. A ruler also needs raw, terrifying physical might to actually survive in this world. Pandu tells Kunti that the wise declare a kshatriya, a warrior, must be endued with physical strength, or else he is basically no kshatriya at all. He demands a stark contrast to his first son. Where Yudhishthira was devoted to the good of all creatures, Pandu now commands Kunti to ask for an offspring of superior strength, largeness of limbs, and the capability to humble everyone's pride.
And we see the exact same birth cycle repeat, but this time with a completely different elemental force. Following Pandu's demand for strength, Kunti invokes Vayu, the mighty god of wind. Vayu literally arrives riding upon a deer, granting her a child of fierce prowess. And once again, that incorporeal voice rings out, prophesying that this child, who will be named Bhima, is going to be the foremost of all endued with strength.
Now I've got to ask you, what do you think happens when a divine baby, who is practically made of pure elemental force, falls right out of his mother's lap onto a solid mountain?
The source material gives us this incredible, highly visual anecdote. Kunti is sitting on the mountain breast with baby Bhima fast asleep in her lap. Suddenly, she gets startled by a tiger. She jumps up in a panic and completely forgets the baby. Bhima just falls. But because his infant body is literally as hard as a thunderbolt, he doesn't get a single scratch. Instead, the massive rock he lands on just shatters into 100 fragments. King Pandu sees this and is utterly amazed. And, as a super fascinating footnote in the text, the very day this indestructible baby was born happened to be the exact same birthday of Duryodhana, the man who would eventually become his absolute greatest rival.
Section 3. Forging the Ultimate Warrior.
All right, having secured a king of justice and a brute of absolute strength, Pandu's ambition just skyrockets. He begins to think heavily about destiny and exertion. He decides he wants a son of worldwide fame, someone capable of vanquishing literally any foe. But you can't just casually summon the king of the celestials to get a world-conquering son. Notice the intense timeline and the extreme exertion required here. After taking counsel with great rishis, Kunti observes an auspicious vow for 1 full year. Meanwhile, King Pandu himself stands on one leg from morning to evening every single day. His mind is wrapped in meditation, practicing the absolute severest austerities just to get Indra's attention.
And you know what? Those austerities totally pay off.
Indra approaches Pandu, highly gratified, and promises a son who will be an irresistible slayer of foes. Kunti then invokes Indra, receives his ultimate blessing, and that leads to the arrival of Arjuna. But this time, the prophecy isn't just your standard incorporeal voice. The text specifically describes it as a voice loud and deep as the clouds, filling the entire sky, and it's heard by every single living creature in the assembly.
I mean, just listen to the unbelievable resume this voice drops for a baby that literally just took his first breath. The voice proclaims, Arjuna will be equal to the god Shiva in prowess. He's going to subjugate rival kingdoms like the Madras and Kurus. He will literally burn down the Khandava woods to satisfy the fire god, Agni. He'll perform 3 great sacrifices. He will gratify Mahadeva in battle and receive the ultimate celestial weapon, the Pashupata. This isn't just a birth, guys. This is the announcement of a cosmic weapon in human form.
Section 4. A massive celestial celebration.
You definitely don't announce a resume like that without throwing an absolute massive party. And the VIP guest list to see this one child is staggering. The sheer scale of the heavenly hierarchy gathered here is immense. You have the 7 great rishis, you've got the 12 Adityas and the 11 Rudras. Dozens of the most famous apsaras like Menaka and Urvasi arrive in these fine robes, dancing and singing in chorus. The celestial musicians, the Gandharvas, are singing in charming notes. Even the mighty wrathful snakes of high ascetic merit, the Nagas like Vasuki and Takshaka, show up for this. The text points out that only the most advanced ascetics could even perceive this dazzling crowd waiting on the mountain peaks.
Section 5. The limits of divine law. Okay, so Pandu now has a son of perfect justice, an indestructible bruiser, and a world-famous warrior. You'd think he'd be satisfied, right? Nope. Tempted by the desire for even more children, King Pandu turns to his wife and actually asks for a 4th divine invocation. He wants to spin that celestial wheel just one more time to see what other superpowers he can add to his dynasty.
And this brings us right back to that striking boundary we looked at the very beginning of the explainer. Kunti looks at her husband, the king, and she completely shuts him down. She quotes the scripture directly to him, saying, "The wise do not sanction a 4th delivery even in a season of distress." She explains the strict societal and spiritual math here. Intercourse with 4 different men makes a woman a wanton. With 5, she becomes a harlot. She basically tells him, look, you are a learned king. Why are you letting your greed for offspring make you forget the actual law?
So here we have this incredible situation of limitless divine magic. Kunti literally holds the cheat code to the universe. She can summon gods who arrive on deer and in sun chariots, gods who drop indestructible babies that can shatter mountains, but that limitless celestial power crashes headfirst into the rigid, unbreakable social and mortal laws of the ancient times. Kunti's firm boundary is what finally stops the divine assembly line. It forever locks in the origins of this heroic trio, Yudhishthira, Bhima, and Arjuna. It really makes you wonder, if mortals possessed the infinite power of the gods today, would our earthly laws be strong enough to tell us when to stop?